Kanun-e-Esasi mandated or made it compulsory that education was open to everyone. Irrespective of who you were, where you were from, education was open to all young people. But there was a key. There would be no interference in religious education, which means if you were a non-Muslim, you still had to learn about the Quran and the life of the Prophet and the Hadith and those kinds of things, which was fine. And it made you get an education beyond just religious education. But because you were in a Muslim empire, Islamic education was seen as critical. So there was no question, no compromise on Islamic education. Also, education was supposed to be free for the public. In other words, parents or families were not paying. It was either the government that supported education or funds were collected, as we saw earlier, from the public. Philanthropy was practiced. If you were rich and you could afford, you contributed so that others in society could be successful as well. Something, unfortunately, that we don't see today. That philanthropy, that need, that I have the means, I can't keep all the means to myself. How do others benefit from my means? That has to be learnt today from this Turkish Ottoman 18th century empire. Al-Abdul Hamid period. After losing the Russian war, education gained importance. Why? When the Turks lost the Russian war, it was seen as an impediment, and so what resulted was a need to educate. Reforms came about in education. We lost the war, we lost the empire, now what? What do we do? How do we gain our footing again? And so education was seen as a key point in re-establishing the Turkish hold in that region. Vocational and art schools increased. People began to understand and see that professional education was not needed by everyone. You needed vocational education, you needed people to get training so that vocational services could be rendered also in the community and society and country, and education in arts and humanities also flourished. So again, what we see is there is a range of education that was being offered to different individuals based on their capabilities, their potential, and their interest. Increased freedom in the press, because now the printing press was there, material was being printed and published, textbooks and learning materials were beginning to come about, and so freedom of the press came about, with the result that there were textbooks, there was reading material, there was lots of additional things that could now be brought into the classroom. And the Turks learned a great lesson from this war and changed their education once again to meet the demands and needs of the current times then. Higher education for girls, and girls started working in government offices. So for the first time now, they realized that it was important for their women to get an education, to get higher education also. Not just stop them at primary, middle, or high school level, but allow them to continue in the universities, and women were allowed to get jobs in government offices as well. Preschool education and professional education also flourished. So the early years and the post-high school education, professional education for engineers or doctors or whatever the professions were at that time. So a more holistic education, females were involved, young people were involved, and it helped the Turkish government regain their footing in the region.